This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, now that I have my gavel, I'll call this meeting to order. And this is the Metropolitan Water District Representative Caucus of special meeting of the Board of Directors of the West Basin Municipal Water District. It is now 12:31, and so now we will call for roll call.
Yes, President Williams. Director Alvarez. Director Deere. Director Gray.
Here.
Director Houston.
Here.
And President Williams.
Here. Okay. Next is item number 3, which would be public comment. Any public comment? Anyone wishing to address the board?
President Williams, we have not received any requests for public comment. I do see we have a number of guests here, I think 33 total. So if anybody would like to speak during public comment, please let us know now.
Very good.
And President Williams, if you don't mind, we do have one caller in. Is that Director Deere, are you with us? No. President Williams, you may proceed.
Okay, well, it takes us to item number 4. So, and we have two items under there. So what I'm going to do at this time is that I'm going to give control of item 4 to you, Mr. General Manager, so that you can go ahead and proceed with that.
Yes, thank you very much, President Williams. The first item that we have is item 4A under discussion items, and it is related to the Metropolitan Water District update by Devin Apadier, the Assistant General Manager and Chief Operating Officer for Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. He will be providing us an update on water supply conditions, as well as the proposed regional drought emergency that Metropolitan Water District will be considering next week, as well as any other related MWD issues. So with that, Devin, I'll hand it off to you.
Well, thank you, EJ. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, EJ, and good afternoon, President Williams, members of the board. It's good to be here with you today. EJ, can I ask you, do I have the ability to cast from my screen? Have you given me that capability here?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
And we can see your screen now.
Thank you. That's great. So as EJ had mentioned, I'd like to share with you a little bit of information that we'll be talking with our board about next week. I'd like to start with just a general update on the supply conditions that we're seeing that are kind of developing as we go into 2022. I want to talk to you about an action item that we'll be bringing to the board to consider, which would essentially declare a drought emergency here in Southern California. And then a second companion action item, which will be adjustments to the conservation program that we run at Metropolitan to respond to some of the drought conditions that we're seeing. And then obviously, as EJ had said, I'm happy to get into any questions or Q&A on these items or other items that we have on the agenda coming up for next week at the board. So the first thing to share with you here is just a little bit of background on what we've experienced over the course of the last year. This is information that's coming from NOAA. They are showing here the last year from September of 2020 through August of 21. And what you see is that for the nation, you've got different colors showing how hot or how cool that last year was compared to history. And the thing I find remarkable about this is much of the Western United States falls into that pink color, which is that when you look at temperature, the temperatures for that year were far above average. The most remarkable piece, however, is the state of California. And you look at central and northern California, that dark red means that for that historical record period going back into the late 1800s, that year was actually the hottest on record for that area. So we've seen very warm conditions, particularly in the watersheds for the Colorado River, and record temperatures in the watersheds for the State Water Project, which are obviously the watersheds that produce water for our 2 imported supplies that we manage. So the next piece will be, once that pops up, precipitation. And so while the previous graphic was all about temperature, this is all about how wet has it been over that same time period, that 1 year from September 2020 through August of 21. And very similar approach for the way that NOAA has put this graphic together. So you see the greens, the light greens, dark greens are wetter conditions during that year. The browns are drier conditions. And again, the Western US, similar colors, anything from light to medium brown. The outline that you see in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming area there is the upper basin of the Colorado River. And so you see that was relatively dry. But then if you pan left on this graphic to California, again, you see central and a portion of Northern California experiencing the record for the driest year. And what we're actually seeing, I'll speak to this a little bit later, but I think I've got a graphic to show you. But this last 2-year period, if you look at the State Water Project watershed, it is the driest 2-year period that we've seen. So gives you some context for what we're seeing here. And so obviously runoff has not been what we would expect under normal conditions, given what I just shared with you. On the left, you see the snowpack over the course of the last water year at about 70% of normal, but that led to runoff that was less than 40% of normal. So the combination of the dry conditions, but also hot, and in particular, early hot conditions. So you have vegetation that comes out that springs to life earlier in the year, and the evapotranspiration of that vegetation, it's starting to use water for a larger portion of the year, which exacerbates the problem and results in even lower runoff than you'd expect. And similarly, if you look at the right side of the graphic, it's the same story. That's the Colorado River watershed. And you're seeing, snowpack that was a bit less than average, but then runoff that was far below what you would have expected in kind of a normal condition. But things started to change as we turned the clock to the new water year. The new water year starts on October 1st and runs through the end of September next year. And you probably all heard about this term of the bomb cyclone that was off the coast of the western United States, and that pushed a series of storms into California. We got some precipitation down here in Southern California, but the brunt of it moved into central and northern California, and it did actually hit the northern Sierras, which really feeds into the Feather River system that produces water for the State Water Project supply. So we started off well, which is a positive sign as compared to what we saw the last couple years. But the fact is that more is needed. Last week, our general manager and I were up in Northern California. We were meeting with officials from the state, including the Department of Water Resources, and we were actually able to do a flyover of Lake Oroville and a couple of the other reservoirs. This was actually a set of photos that I took while on that plane, and you can see on the left the rebuilt spillway at Oroville there. The lower portion in white is the emergency spillway, and you probably see a long white string that goes off to the right side of that graphic. That is the main gated spillway. Remember, back in 2017, there was all the damage to that spillway because of the record wet conditions. On the left, that you see the level of Lake Oroville there, and in fact, Lake Oroville has been drawn down to levels that were not seen since 1977. even to the point where they're no longer able to generate power out of Lake Oroville. On the right, you see a picture from the north side of the dam where you see some of the marinas there. We did see a pretty big increase, however, in the level at Lake Oroville as a result of that storm, that bomb cyclone. It's a drop in the bucket, but it is still good news. It was a little bit less than 200,000 acre feet increase in the level at Oroville, which is remarkable for an October, about 30 foot gain. However, this is not enough for the Department of Water Resources to be able to make water available effective January 1st through an allocation. What they've told us is that the initial allocation for 2022 will be announced likely on December 1st. It could happen a couple days in advance of that, but under our contract, they're required to make that announcement at least by December 1st, and it will be a zero allocation. We asked them, do you see enough water in the hills now and with the reservoir coming up a little bit to be able to change that? And the response that we got was that they still need to see more than 600,000 acre feet increase in Oroville before they could start saying now any additional water can be allocated. And this has to do largely with the commitments that they have to species protection downstream of the reservoir and in the Delta. So while we've gotten off to a very good start for the year with that initial set of storms, conditions have been so dry, the reservoir so low that we're going to need a fair amount more before we'll start to see the state releasing water and declaring an allocation available for the next year. So bottom line, we remain stuck in a drought. Kind of officially, this is from the U.S. Drought Monitor's website, and you could see that California, the Western United States, continue to be in the dark red to light red and orange, signaling moderate to extreme drought scenarios here. So in terms of our actions here within the region, I want to take you back a little bit. We'll look first at storage, but then we'll talk about the actions that we've taken as this drought has unfolded to get us where we are today. This is our storage graphic. This shares a combination of info on this one slide. In the light blue, what you see all the way up to the top of the light blue is our storage capacity and how that capacity has increased over the years. So we now, in our history, we've got more capacity available to us than before because of the deals that we've struck with Lake Mead storage, as an example, the development of Diamond Valley Lake, and many of our contractual groundwater banks that we've developed over the years. So that's why that capacity graphic has really gone up. And then what you see in the other colors, starting with the brown along the bottom, that is our commitment to hold what is now 750,000 acre feet in emergency storage. And then the orange is water that we can use above our emergency reserves to mitigate drought impacts. And you see how that has fluctuated up and down over the years. And coming into this drought sequence back in that 2019 timeframe, we had record levels of storage, which was a very good news story. The yellow shows that we are drafting quite a bit of that storage this year. We will probably end this year in the mid 2 million acre feet, probably 2.5 million acre feet of water in storage to be able to mitigate droughts. However, where that water really matters, and that makes a difference. And so that's why we show this graphic, which is breaking down where that storage is. And if we start on the left, what you'll see is this starts to tell a slightly different story about our storage portfolio. You can see that we've actually been drawing down storage on the State Water Project system, which is that graphic on the upper left. Those are the reserves available in State Water Project storage. This is available to the portions of our service area that are heavily dependent on the State Water Project. And in 2020, which was a drought year, we only got a 20% allocation on the State Water Project. we were drawing storage down to meet the needs of those State Water Project dependent areas. And this year, with only a 5% State Water Project allocation, we're using almost half of that storage this year to make it through the year. The use of storage elsewhere in the system is a little bit different. In fact, on the Colorado side, you see us maintaining storage levels there pretty well. And the key on the Colorado side is recall that recently the federal government declared a shortage, the first ever shortage on the Colorado River. The reason that we've placed water there, particularly in Lake Mead, is so that if that shortage gets deeper, we can draw on those reserves to be able to continue to have a full Colorado River aqueduct coming into our service area, even when that condition on the river is a shortage and a deepening shortage. We'll still be able to have that full aqueduct. So that's why you see that water pre-positioned on the Colorado side there. And then finally, the lower right-hand corner graphic in gray is the drought storage that's available here within the region. The poster child for this really is Diamond Valley Lake. We also have a little bit of storage in some other facilities too, but that's the key. I do want to emphasize on that graphic, there's actually a lot more water in storage than that graphic shows, because it's only showing the dry year water. It is not showing the emergency storage, which is really there just in case we have a catastrophic event. So that gives you a sense of where the water is in our system. And the reason I think this is important is because we are seeing quite a bit of strain meeting demands in the portion of our system that is heavily reliant on State Water Project supplies. And the storage that's available in that area is really that graphic that's in the upper left-hand corner, and you can see it declining quite a bit. And the other aspect of that upper left-hand corner is we've used all of the storage that's easy to get to. If you take a look at Castaic or San Luis Reservoir, those are the big surface water reservoirs, and they have declined. So the large portion of that little blue bar in 2021 in that graphic is actually groundwater that has to be pumped up and into the aqueduct. So you're not able to get at that water as easily as the surface water reservoirs. So another important point there that will lead to some of the actions that we've taken this year. So this starts to give you a bit of a history and timeline on the way that this is unfolded. Recall that 2020 was a dry year. In fact, the allocation on the State Water Project in 2020 was equivalent to the lowest that had been forecasted 20 years ago. So it used to be that DWR said the lowest that we would ever get is a 20% allocation. And actually we got that in 2020. And now here we are in 2021 and we've got only a 5% allocation. To give you a sense, a 5% allocation gives Metropolitan 100,000 acre feet of water. So in a year where we're delivering demands to our member agencies, round number for you to think about, it's almost 1.6 million acre feet that we're delivering to our member agencies. 100,000 of that is coming from our allocation on the State Water Project. The rest has to be made up from Colorado River or stored supplies or some transfers. So here on the left, you start with January of 2021. And what we did is we started moving water from Diamond Valley Lake into a portion of our system that normally doesn't receive that water on the Lakeview pipeline. We also started to turn our operations over. As many of you know, we can deliver a blend of water supplies, whether it's State Water Project or Colorado Water, into portions of our service area. And seeing that we just had that pretty dry year, and then we were moving into 2021, we didn't know how much State Water Project we would get, and it looked like it could be dry. We started to minimize the blend of State Water Project water in our service area. What that means is we were starting to push Colorado water as far as we could into the service area and not use State Water Project water if we didn't need to. In February, we started pumping back from the Lake Paris Reservoir, which is out near Hemet in the Paris area. We started pumping back from that reservoir to meet the demands of one of our treatment plants out in Riverside, which is the Mills Water Treatment Plant. Mills is 100% State Water Project water. It can't get Colorado River water. And so by pulling the water out of that reservoir, we were reducing the demand on the State Water Project system. The Lake Paris Reservoir is the terminal reservoir on the east side of the State Water Project. So it's the final reservoir that DWR operates out there. In March, we started getting returns from our groundwater pump-in programs on the State Water Project. So what you can see is as things start to get more crystal clear that 2021 is going to be really another dry year and potentially historic dry year, we start pulling on all of these levers to meet the demands, particularly in the State Water Project reliant or dependent areas. So we start getting the groundwater pump-ins to augment our allocation that we would get on the State Water Project. So these are those Central Valley programs that are pumping groundwater into the aqueduct. In April of this year, we went to a full 8-pump flow on our Colorado River Aqueduct. And you can see in the picture there, at that level, there's very, very little freeboard on the aqueduct system. So you're really seeing the aqueduct running at full capacity there. And that was the first time that we had done that in 6 years. We hadn't had to run a full aqueduct flow since all the way back in 2015. But this is representative of as demands start to go up a little bit into the late spring, summertime, we wanted to have that base flow of Colorado supply so that we wouldn't really need to be bringing as much water on the State Water Project. And in that same month, our board authorized us to go out and purchase water transfers on the State Water Project. Also, another action that we hadn't done since the previous drought in that 2014-15 timeframe. We took some unprecedented actions in that April timeframe. In the lower two boxes, what you see there is we did a deal with the State Department of Water Resources so that earlier you heard me say that we were pumping back from Lake Paris to the Mills treatment plant. We actually worked with them to put a bulkhead in their system so that we could then bring water from Diamond Valley Lake up into the DWR system and connect that water over to our Mills treatment plant. By putting that bulkhead in, we had to sign a special agreement with DWR. We literally took the Mills treatment plant off of the State Water Project system. They were no longer receiving any water from the State Water Project system and from DWR, and we're now feeding them from Diamond Valley Lake. It's the first time that's ever been done. And the final thing that happened in April was we worked with Eastern Municipal Water District, and they have a system where they can either take some water from Mills treatment plant or from our Skinner treatment plant, and they shifted over to taking water from the Skinner plant. And the reason that was important is by that time, the Skinner treatment plant was only receiving 100% Colorado River water. So that meant that Eastern Municipal was really only receiving Colorado River water at that point, again, reducing our needs for State Water Project water in such a dry sequence. In May, our board approved a special program to encourage agencies to shift off of any State Water Project supplies if they could. And basically, if an agency could shift to a different connection and receive Colorado River water, but it might cost them some money, this would be a way for us to compensate for them for those increased costs. So the board approved that program, and I'll speak to some actions that were taken under that program a little bit later. We also improved, made some changes to our Lakeview pipeline. Those were completed in this time frame. And that Diamond Valley Lake to Mills operation that I had mentioned to you, we did that agreement with DWR. We put the bulkhead in. It started operating in May. In June, we started a pump back operation that was the result of investments that we made coming out of the last drought. We had the Gregg Avenue pumping facility, and we learned in that last drought that being able to pump Colorado River water all the way up to the west side of our system, that facility was capable of about 50 CFS. it is a great opportunity to increase reliability, but that pumping plant was really only meant for emergency intermittent use. So we completely rebuilt that pumping plant, and we were able to bring that new pumping plant back into testing operation, and then we started to base load that pumping, and we've been pumping using the Gregg Avenue pumping plant since June, day in, day out. Which is a very different operation than was meant for that facility. But since we rebuilt that facility, we were able to start base loading it. And that's getting Colorado River water all the way up to the western portion of LADWP, some all the way up into Cayugas. So that's water, that's Colorado River water a little bit that's now making it all the way into Ventura County and to Las Virgenes. If we move into July, there you see West Basin also making a decision to shift some of your demands to connections that could receive Colorado River water. City of Los Angeles started doing a large shift in their system also to start taking Colorado River water instead of State Water Project supply. So you can see now Metropolitan, many of our member agencies all engaged in moving demands off of that State Water Project just in case this drought continues. In August, one of our groundwater pump-in programs that has had some water quality issues over the course of the last couple of years that has prevented us from pumping that groundwater into the aqueduct, the State Water Project, they were able to start getting us some return water through an exchange with the Friant system. So this is an example of us working with other districts around the state to try to move water in a way where we could get a little bit of a benefit out of that in this extreme dry circumstance. And the real big thing that happened in August of 2021 for us was our board declared an official water supply alert. This came with a lot of media attention. Obviously, we were supporting the governor's call for voluntary conservation. We were asking our consumers, our water agencies and businesses throughout our service area to focus on ways to reduce water use during this time. Finally, in September, yet another agency was able to start shifting water. It takes time for agencies to be able to figure out how within their own systems to move water so that they're accessing Colorado River water instead of State Water Project water. And that agency was Three Valleys Municipal Water District, and they started doing that in September. So this is the final timeline graphic, and what this timeline graphic starts to get to is the latter months of the year, and so you're starting to see some of the things we're going to be bringing. In the yellow, those are boxes that are going to be coming forward, but let's start with October, which is in the past now. Obviously, Governor Newsom at that point actually declared a state of emergency for all of California. Remember that what he had been doing is doing it kind of in a phased approach, looking at the conditions in each county. And by October, he saw fit to declare that emergency for all of our counties. One of the things that is important here is that they were obviously in coordination with us at Metropolitan. And we had been having a conversation with the State Department of Water Resources about their reservoirs, and particularly the southern reservoirs that have emergency storage we can access. Let's say if 2022 ended up being an extremely low allocation, we were talking with them about how we would access that emergency storage. And one of the insights from their legal team was, well, if we need to provide some of that emergency storage to you for a period of time during next year to get through a few months, that would be only authorized if you were in an emergency. And so that was part of what Governor Newsom's declaration of emergency for all counties now allows, is that it allows our region to have access to some of that emergency storage if we need it in the, say, the driest part of 2022, if it continues to be dry. So here, this brings us to November 2021, and we have some things that we have put on the table for our board as action items next week at the board meetings. The first one that is green, surrounded by a red outline, is a drought emergency declaration for our service area. And I'm going to walk you through in the next few slides what would be in that drought declaration, that emergency declaration. And then I'll also talk to you about some of the changes that would be the second action item. These are separate actions that the board would consider, but the second one is an expansion of our conservation programs and providing some additional opportunities for conservation incentives in our service area. The third item, I won't be highlighting this for you today, but it's just something for you to know that we are also bringing an action to the board that is a resolution in support of a grant request that we have submitted to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. This is a grant for funding assistance for our turf removal program. It would allow us to increase the incentive on our turf removal program from $2 to $3 per square foot. And we've applied for that grant, and now we're asking the board to submit a resolution in support of that grant to the federal government. In December, we are envisioning a number of additional actions. We have done a review of our system, and we see that there are a couple opportunities to invest in facilities that are changes to our system that would allow us to move more Colorado or stored water into our state water project dependent areas. These are areas right now that really can only receive state water project supplies from us. But with a number of new investments, we would be able to pump water up to some of these areas and get Colorado water and Diamond Valley Lake water to them. So that's two separate facilities that we'll be bringing to the board to authorize the design for those facilities. We'll also be bringing a new agreement with San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. They are a fellow state water contractor, and some of you may recall that when we built the inland feeder, the lower portion of the inland feeder took a long time to complete. But we had a mutual aid agreement with San Bernardino where we were able to move some of our state water project water through the upper part of the inland feeder and then into their system. And that connected downstream with Diamond Valley Lake, and we were able to get water into Diamond Valley Lake before inland feeder was completed. We've maintained that mutual aid agreement with San Bernardino, and in those discussions with them, we have worked out a deal where we'll be able to work with them on a part of their system to pump back and access supply in early 22, if things continue to be dry, to be able to get some additional water up into our state water project dependent area. So that's part of the reason we're bringing this new agreement with San Bernardino, to be able to, we'd have to offset some of the costs of that operation to them to be able to get water up into that area. We're also exploring what could be a third action item, which is a concept of having a reverse cyclic program. A cyclic program right now allows us to store water in local groundwater basins, and we put the water into the basin, and then they pay for that water coming out of the basin over time. We don't compel the pumping. We don't have strings attached to when the water is pumped, but we just give them a payment plan over up to 5 years to buy that water out. We've got some ideas for what would be a reverse cyclic program where a groundwater basin could say, well, we want water this year. We would like to have the water this year, but they place an order with us, and we're then able to deliver it as we get the water available over the next couple years. And that program would recognize that they made a request of us, and we're delivering it when it's convenient for us. It's a concept that's developing, and we may see that as an action item in December. It may come early 22, but I wanted you to be aware that we're talking about that with the managers of the basins in our member agencies. So then this extends into, obviously, 2022. There may need to be additional actions as we go into that part of the year. But we are also going to be asking for emergency authority for our general manager to enter into agreements that may be necessary to help us through the early part of the year. And so that's why I'm showing that as being covered by the emergency declaration that I'm about to share with you. So at this point, we can get into kind of the details of this emergency declaration and this resolution that we're asking for. So the first thing that we would be doing with this, it's an action before the board, is we are proposing declaring an emergency for metropolitan drought emergency here. This would obviously acknowledge all of the conditions that I've already shared with you, but importantly, it would move us from a mode. You can imagine the media attention this will get, and the questions are, say back in August when we did the water supply alert, we were supporting calling for voluntary conservation. What this will do is it will move us to calling for mandatory conservation, specifically in the areas where we can reduce state water project deliveries. And that includes areas that are pulling on state water project storage. So it's not just water that's allocated in 2022, but it's also if you're benefiting from state water project water that was stored previously. For example, Diamond Valley Lake, if we're having to route water from Diamond Valley Lake to an agency, that's state water project water that we stored in Diamond Valley Lake. So we would be asking them to implement mandatory conservation measures in response to this drought. This would also provide Adele, our general manager, some additional contract authority, given it would be a declared emergency. And I'll talk with that a little bit. It's really meant to allow us to be more responsive as this drought emerges and be really agile in terms of the way we respond. So the resolution itself, what you will see in that resolution is a call to action by our member agencies. Take a look at the past drought response measures that you've implemented and how they worked. Take all reasonably practicable measures that you can to reduce any use of state water project supplies that your agency has, including state water project supplies that are coming from storage. And so that third bullet is implementing conservation actions and moving to mandatory conservation requirements in order to reduce that state water project use. Now, the important element of this being an emergency declaration is under our administrative code, it allows our general manager a little bit more authority and ability to respond under those emergency conditions. So this resolution calls on our GM to develop a unified message that we would share with all of our agencies around the drought. It would feed into our conservation messaging program and the ad buys that we would be making so that there's that unified message. It also directs the GM to develop and expand additional regional conservation programs. And in fact, we would be bringing that action item at the exact same time, which are some changes to the conservation program. It's also a resolution that asks the GM to be further looking, to not just to respond to the drought now, but to identify and implement measures that will allow us to provide a high level of reliability in those state water project areas for future multi-year and severe droughts. So this is similar to the two projects that I mentioned to you that would be coming in December that will allow us, once those projects are done, to move more Colorado water or stored water up into the state water project dependent areas. But we're talking about beyond those two projects to develop basically a capital improvement program that will get to a point where hopefully in the future we really don't have much in the way of state water project exclusive areas or dependent areas anymore. And finally, the last bullet there is to seek external state and federal funding to help pay for this work that will be going on. The additional authority under the emergency provision that's given to the general manager here, it will allow Adele to enter into agreements to secure permits, to commit to purchase transfer supplies, and to develop CEQA and approve CEQA documentation that would be delegated to the GM. And then the requirement is that if the GM exercises that authority, and the limits are for a single action or a single commitment, it's up to 5 million, and cumulative, the total amount cannot exceed 25 million. But we still have to come back to the board. It's just that we do it after the fact, and we would report to the board on anything that Adele has done that uses that authority. We would report that at the very next board meeting. So you're still getting the board oversight over these things, but it allows us, particularly as we move into that January, February timeframe, to be a little bit more agile Historically, that time frame is when you start to see commitments being made for transfer supplies. And it's vitally important that if the state is really talking about a zero allocation for 2022, that we have the ability to negotiate and to put deals in place to access transfer supplies to replace the water we would have gotten from the state water project. So those are some of the key things that you get out of that emergency declaration. The last piece here are some of the conservation actions. Your team at West Basin has been very engaged with us in developing these recommended conservation actions. We've worked with the conservation coordinators. We reviewed these things actually twice with all the agency GMs. So it's now coming as an action. So the first thing is to seek external funding. If we're able to get that external funding to move our turf replacement incentive from $2 a square foot up to $3 a square foot. It is contingent on getting that external funding. But the second piece is not contingent on external funding. It is moving from $2 to $3 a square foot for public agency turf removal. So this is, you're getting city halls, you're getting public parks, you're getting medians, the public agencies to pull out non-functional turf to replace it with drought-tolerant landscaping, and we're providing an additional dollar above what we've been doing the last 2 years to do that. The third bullet, we run a program where we provide funding to your member agency, and then West Basin has the ability to make decisions on how to utilize that funding. We call it a member agency administered program. And that funding typically comes with some strings attached in terms of the way you can use that funding. It has to adhere to a cost structure of round numbers. It's no more than $200 an acre foot for the program you develop and that you're implementing. We are suspending that if you're doing a program to assist public agencies. And the reason and the thinking that the conservation coordinators had in developing this recommendation was, when you're going through a real drought like this, people will look at City Hall and say, you know, how could they ask for me to save if they're not doing the right thing themselves? So we're really trying to target freeing up this money for you to work with the local agencies that you serve to get their public areas to be as efficient as possible. And so we're essentially removing many of those strings or requirements to free you up to be able to use that money. This was a very, very popular recommendation. People thought that this would help in getting more contact with local cities and districts to be able to conserve water. We'll be expanding on the fourth bullet our direct install program of toilet replacements. This is specifically focused on multifamily housing and older multifamily housing, where we know that for the most part they have the older toilets. We're able to replace them with the new, most efficient toilets. This will be targeting another 20,000 toilet direct install. So we're increasing the budget available for that program. And then we're expanding a partnership that we have with SoCal Gas. SoCal Gas has a great program where they work on replacing high efficiency clothes washers, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And we will be expanding our ability to piggyback on that program with them to look at both providing an incentive to get that done, so they're able to replace more high efficiency clothes washers, but also when they go in and they do that, it's a contact point with the consumer. So seeing how we can piggyback on that program to offer other conservation incentives at the same time, working with them as another major agency. And then the latest new program that would be added is a municipal leak detection and fixing leaks pilot program. All of these would be coming as an action before our board next week for their consideration to approve. Want you to know, at the same time that we're doing this, we do have sort of a limited budget for the conservation program. We're actually drawing on our reserves in order to pay for this program. And that's part of the reason why the recommendation has been structured, so that we want to amp up, say, the turf removal program, but we're looking, we'll amp it up to $3 if we're able to successfully get some of the grant funding to do this. we're not making the public agency piece contingent on that. We're going to do that. We're just going to go right into it. The other thing that we're being careful with is we have a time requirement on the turf removal program. Once you start a project, in order to get your incentive, you got to get that project done in 6 months. And we are seeing that if things get dry enough in 2022, if it's, ends up being a really severe year, there may need to be broad prohibitions on outdoor water use. Well, when you're doing a turf removal program, you remove the turf, yeah, that reduces the water use. But when you're putting a new drought tolerant landscape, at least at the beginning, you have to water that landscape to get it set so that it's healthy. And one of the things that we'd be doing is considering, if we have to do that, ordering, complete, outdoor watering limitations, that we would be allowing people a relief period where you don't have to get it done in 6 months because of what's happening. We would extend that period for folks to get the projects done. So we're not then forcing them to install new landscape and water it at a time when we're trying to curtail water use outdoors, period. So wanted to let you know of some of the thinking around this. And that's it. President Williams, I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I wanted to share, those are a few of what we feel are the really important action items that are coming up here. We've got other items on the agenda also, but I thought we'd focus on those for today. Happy to take any questions or comments or feedback that you have.
Devin, thank you so much for that report. We did hear from President Williams. He did have to step away, so he's handing the gavel off to our Vice President Director, Don Deere. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to chime in.
Can you hear me? This is Don.
Yes, we can.
Okay. That was a very, Devin, a very thorough report. Very, very informative. Are there any questions from anyone?
Yes, Don, it's Pierre Swan.
Here.
Hey, Devin, I know that the Inland Empire in certain areas on the east side of Met, need to get Colorado River water because of basin water quality concerns and requirements put on by the regional boards. Has there been any thought at seeking a waiver on that? That's the first question. And the second question is, the state really emptied the reservoirs last year in order to meet what they perceive as their contractual requirements for the North Delta people, and allowing the people in the South Central Delta to take, as much water as they wanted, even though they greatly exceeded the unimpaired flow of the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin. Any thought, starting to re-examine those agreements in light of the climate change or change conditions? Certainly, it was not considered when they made those agreements. I think the state has the ability to renegotiate them. So 2 different questions. Hey, can you move water? Can you deliver Colorado River water to a number of east side people who would otherwise take only state water? And the second question is, what about those North Delta, and South Delta agreements?
Here, thanks for the questions, and they're both spot on in terms of challenges that we're actually working on right now. On the first one, there are actually a couple issues inherent to what you are asking. One of them is the direct question you're asking, the TDS and the requirements of some of these basins and getting waivers there. So that's a discussion that we're having, and frankly, we're not leading that. Local agencies are leading that because they see that they could get some water, but it would be Colorado River water. The second piece is a discussion that we are leading, which is these are areas that do not have active quagga mussel control plans in place. Remember, the issue with Colorado River water is not just the TDS, but it's also the quagga mussels. And in the state of California, you're not allowed to willingly move water that contains quagga mussels into new basins. You have to have a quagga mussel control plan in place to do that. And so we're working with a number of these agencies to try to get those in place. So when we get the system improvements that will allow us to move Colorado River water up there, they'll then be able to take that water. It's not a fast process. And so we've got folks, as you know, Pierre, that from a water quality perspective, they're some of the best in the world, and they're helping to design those quagga mussel control plans. But ultimately, they have to be put in place at the local agency level to accept the water from us. And so we're working with them in that regard. The second piece of your question, there's two elements to it up north. The first piece is the Central Delta, and we've been in discussions with the Delta Water Master, Michael George, about the approach that he'll be taking to both measure available water for the islands in the Delta, and then the enforcement approach that he would use. I would say that that is an evolving situation. He's wanting to use something known as open ET, which I think we're supportive of. It's not as good as measuring the actual water use in these areas. But he's wanting to go that route and compare that estimated water use with the flows that they're seeing in the rivers that abut the islands. That's one piece of it. Okay, so we're in discussions with him there. The other piece is actually DWR working with the state board on the upstream use. And it turns out that they're very likely to have even deeper curtailment orders in the upstream, for example, Feather River system than they had this last year. When you have a zero allocation, you can imagine that we as contractors are wanting to make sure that DWR is not delivering any water that they don't need to, or providing any water they don't need to up to the upstream folks. And that discussion is being had at a level with DWR working with the State Water Board.
Yeah, under the public trust, the state has the ability to renegotiate these things other than those things required by the Endangered Species Act. And a number of the agreements, the North Delta Agreement in particular, back in the late 80s, was very generous. In the South and Central Delta have been using water under riparian rights where there is no unimpeded flow. So one has to wonder, and both the Bureau and DWR sent letters back a number of years ago to the State Board to try to get them to curtail that. Okay.
Yeah, that's Pierre, just further expansion on that. What they're looking at is a monthly estimate of declaring whether there's any water available for the South and Central Delta folks to use. And it'll be based on, real time as you can get for them, which would basically be a monthly declaration of you can use water this month, you can't use water the following month, depending on the flows. But this is evolving. I mean, this is something that they haven't really tried to enforce that before.
That's over 1 million acre feet a year.
Is sound been cut off? Hello?
I can hear you, Don.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Pierre, do you have sound?
I have sound. I can see you and hear you.
We can hear you, Don.
Very good.
Always good to see you. And it's congratulations to EJ, I think.
Well, acting general manager probably needs condolences. I'm not sure. But,
that's why I said I think, Don.
Let's continue. While we have Devin here, are there any other questions for him? I guess not. Devin, thank you very much for your information.
Thank you very much for having me today. It's been a pleasure.
We'll go on to our next agenda item, which is 4B, legislative update from EJ. If you would, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Director Deere. On occasion, we do have a legislative update included within our MWD caucus meeting, and we thought we would throw this on because where we are in the legislative process, clearly we're in the process of planning and preparing for the next legislative session. As part of that effort, several different organizations hold kind of these exercises and open opportunities for water agencies to propose bills and get the ball rolling as far as working together and trying to iron out some of the ideas. And there were 2 legislative proposals that have been discussed, both at MWD's workshop, but also the Association of California Water Agencies. So I just thought I'd bring them up here for discussion. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to myself or our staff. Of course, we'd love to discuss the issues with you further. But the first legislative proposal that I was going to mention is related to enhancing public access through teleconferencing. And this proposal has been submitted by Three Valleys Municipal Water District. You might recall that just last year, there was legislation introduced, Assembly Bill 703, by Assembly Member Blanca Rubio. And the intent was to extend the teleconferencing options for public meetings under the Brown Act. And Three Valleys Municipal Water District is currently hoping to get a new bill authored in the new legislative session to allow local agencies that intend to utilize these services for public access through teleconferencing long-term and post-pandemic. Clearly, they're looking to make this an option that agencies can take advantage of for the foreseeable future. And you may or may not recall, legislation was adopted at the very end of the legislative session as Assembly Bill 361 that does provide a process for public agencies to utilize a monthly approved resolution to continue to utilize these teleconferencing options. But that does sunset, of course, once the declared emergency is concluded. So looking at Three Valleys Municipal Water District's proposal, this would allow public agencies to utilize this into the future. The second item I wanted to bring up, legislative proposal, is actually something that is being proposed by Eastern Municipal Water District, but West Basin has been reaching out to them and working with them, and I know that Devin in his presentation talked a little bit about the city of Los Angeles, but this would be related to improving water use efficiency through non-functional turf management, and the proposal would establish a non-functional turf advisory committee comprised of a defined list of participants, including water and recycled water providers, city and county government representatives, homeowners associations, environmental justice advocates, and others to advise a state agency, obviously to remove and reduce the use of non-functional turf. This item was discussed at Aqua. There is a lot of discussion going on related to this issue. It does look like there's a great deal of support for the proposal, but there's also, I would say, a great deal of opposition even within the industry. But I think that when you look at some of the agencies that are involved, they're looking to take some ownership and leadership on this issue, really drive the dialogue during this month or two where we have options as far as how we draft the proposal, and of course, hopefully get it introduced in the new legislative session. This proposal is very similar to something that Southern Nevada had done, and I think that garnered a lot of public attention. And I think that even within Nevada, people look at it as an option to really redefine how we utilize landscaping in not just our residential, but also our commercial, industrial, and institutional sections. And of course, in the West Basin service area, we've done a great job of removing turf. We do have a handful of municipalities that have a great deal of turf on their property sites. As Devin just pointed out, we really want to make sure that they have the options to remove that turf and, of course, set examples for the communities that they're serving. So with that, Director Deere, that's all I have under the legislative update, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, not. Let's continue on, EJ, with the agenda. I guess we're at adjournment. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are at 1:30, and so that does conclude all of our items.
Well, very good. If there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.